Hello there, my sleepy citizens. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed streets of Gotham City, where mysteries lurk and the Dark Knight stands vigilant against the forces of chaos. We bring you tales of Batman, uncovering different sides of the man behind the mask. And as our journey through these stories winds down, a calm ambience of Gotham's streets will carry you throughout the night, bringing you to restful sleep without interruptions from any ads. If you enjoy these tales, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the world of Gotham. The first whisper came at 3 in the morning, when Wayne Manor lay wrapped in the profound silence that only old houses know. Bruce Wayne had been reviewing case files in his study, the familiar weight of solitude settling around him like a well-worn cloak, when he heard it. A sound so faint it might have been imagination, yet distinct enough to make him pause mid-sentence in his reading. It seemed to rise from the very walls themselves, a susurration that spoke of secrets buried deeper than memory. The sound carried no words he could distinguish, yet something in its cadence felt almost familiar, like a half-remembered lullaby from childhood. Bruce set aside his papers and listened, but the whisper had already faded into the manor's natural symphony of settling timbers and distant wind. Alfred appeared in the doorway moments later, carrying a silver tray with Earl Grey and digestive biscuits, his nightly ritual of ensuring Master Bruce maintained at least some semblance of proper habits. The butler's expression was characteristically composed, but Bruce had known Alfred long enough to detect the subtle tension around his eyes. "Did you hear that?" Bruce asked quietly, not wanting to disturb whatever delicate balance kept the whispers contained. Alfred set the tray down with practiced silence. "I've been hearing sounds for the past several nights, sir. Nothing I could identify with certainty, but..." He paused, his usually steady hands adjusting the teacup with unnecessary precision. "Old houses speak, as you know, but these whispers seem different, more purposeful, if you'll forgive the fanciful description." Bruce rose from his desk, moving to the tall windows that overlooked the manor's grounds. Moonlight cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, and beyond them, Gotham's skyline glittered with 10,000 points of light. Yet something about the familiar view felt unsettled tonight, as if the very foundations of his world had shifted imperceptibly. "Alfred," he said slowly, "how long has your family served the Waynes?" The question seemed to surprise the butler. "6 generations, sir. My great-great-grandfather began his service with your great-great-grandfather in 1855. Why do you ask? Have you ever wondered about the manor's original construction, the architectural inconsistencies you mentioned last month?" Alfred's expression grew thoughtful. "Indeed, sir. I've noticed them more frequently lately. Doorways that lead nowhere, walls that seem thicker than necessary, spaces that don't quite align with the official blueprints. I'd attributed them to renovations over the decades, but..." He trailed off, clearly reluctant to voice some growing suspicion. Another whisper threaded through the room then, clearer than before. This time, Bruce caught fragments that might have been words. "Wayne, remember, beneath." The sound seemed to emanate from the east wall, where portraits of his ancestors gazed down with painted eyes that suddenly seemed less benevolent than he'd always imagined. "We need to examine those inconsistencies more carefully," Bruce decided, "starting with the Foundation records." Alfred nodded, though his usually unflappable demeanor showed signs of strain. "I'll retrieve the architectural plans from the family archives, sir, though I must say, Some of the older documents have been difficult to locate recently. As if responding to their conversation, the whispers grew slightly louder, weaving through the walls with serpentine persistence. Bruce found himself drawn to the portrait of his great-great-grandfather, Nathaniel Wayne, a stern man whose official biography credited him with much of Gotham's early philanthropic infrastructure. Yet now, studying the painted features in the context of these mysterious sounds, Bruce noticed something he'd never observed before. A small owl pin adorning the man's lapel. "Alfred," he said quietly, "what do you know about the Court of Owls?" The butler's face went pale. "An old Gotham nursery rhyme, sir. Children's stories about—" He paused, visibly steeling himself. "Where did you hear that name?" "Oracle's been tracking unusual patterns in Gotham's historical records. References to a secret society, architectural symbols, disappearances that follow certain patterns." Bruce turned from the portrait to study Alfred's reaction. The owl imagery appears in some very old city documents that predate official records of the Wayne family's arrival in Gotham. Another whisper drifted through the room, and this time both men heard it clearly. The Wayne legacy built on borrowed bones. Alfred's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he reached for the tea service. "Perhaps we should examine those foundation records immediately, sir." They descended to the manor's basement archives, a climate-controlled chamber that housed centuries of Wayne family documents. Alfred moved with practiced efficiency despite his obvious unease, retrieving leather-bound volumes and rolled blueprints that smelled of age and carefully preserved secrets. "The original construction documents," Alfred explained, spreading a large blueprint across the reading table, "dated 1855 when your great-great-grandfather commissioned the manor's construction." His finger traced the building's outline, pausing at several locations. "But see here, sir, these chambers beneath the east wing don't appear on any of the later renovations plans." Bruce studied the blueprint with growing interest. The underground spaces formed an intricate network that extended far beyond what he'd always assumed were simple storage cellars. More concerning, the passages seemed to connect with tunnel systems that stretched toward Gotham proper. Infrastructure that had no apparent functional purpose for a private residence. "These passages," he said, measuring distances with his finger, "they're too elaborate for practical use, and they predate the manor's construction by—" "How much?" Alfred consulted another document, his expression growing more troubled. "According to these notations, the tunnel system was already present when construction began. Your ancestor built the manor to incorporate existing underground architecture." He looked up, meeting Bruce's eyes. Said, "I believe we may be standing above structures that were never meant to be discovered." As if summoned by his words, the whispers returned with renewed intensity. They seemed to flow through the very air vents, carrying fragments of conversation that felt less like random sounds and more like deliberate communication. "Wayne, chosen, served, forgotten purpose." Bruce activated his cowl's recording function, hoping to capture audio evidence of the phenomena, but when he played back the recording moments later, it contained only silence. Whatever force generated these whispers existed beyond normal technological detection. "We need to access those passages," he decided. "Tonight." Alfred hesitated. "Sir, if these spaces have remained sealed for over a century, perhaps there's wisdom in leaving them undisturbed." "Alfred," Bruce said gently, "what aren't you telling me?" The butler's composure finally cracked slightly. "My predecessor, my grandfather's predecessor, left private notes about unusual incidents in the manor, sounds at night, architectural anomalies, visitors who came calling but were never officially received. He retrieved a slim journal from beneath the other documents. I've never shared these records because they seemed fanciful, but in light of recent events, Bruce opened the journal carefully, reading entries dated over a century ago. The handwriting was precise, professional, but the content was increasingly unsettling. March 15th, 1887. Master Nathaniel received visitors after midnight. No formal appointment recorded. Guests departed through passages I was not aware existed. Master instructed household to forget we had seen anyone. March 22nd, 1887. Found owl feathers in chambers that should be inaccessible. Master Nathaniel insists no birds could have entered the sealed areas. Beginning to question what else might have access to the manor's hidden spaces. April 3rd, 1887. Master Nathaniel's behavior increasingly erratic. Speaks of duties and inherited obligations that predate his documented family history. I fear the Wayne legacy carries burdens that were never recorded in official genealogies. The whispers seemed to grow stronger as Bruce read, weaving through the archive chamber with increasing urgency. Now they carried what sounded almost like names. Nathaniel, Thomas, Martha, Bruce. They know we're here, Bruce realized. They know we're discovering their secrets. Alfred straightened his shoulders, his natural courage reasserting itself despite obvious fear. Then we should discover them properly, sir. If the Wayne family has some connection to this Court of Owls, we need to understand what that means. For Gotham, and for you. They returned to the main floor, where Bruce accessed the Batcave's computer systems to overlay the historical blueprints with modern architectural scans of the manor. The comparison revealed extensive underground spaces that had been carefully concealed during decades of renovations. Chambers that maintained independent ventilation systems and showed signs of regular, if infrequent, use. "Oracle," Bruce said, activating his communication system. "I need you to research every reference to owl symbolism in Wayne family documents. Cross-interference with Gotham historical records, particularly anything relating to secret societies or underground architecture." "Already on it," Barbara's voice replied, though she sounded puzzled. "Bruce, I've been getting some strange interference in the cave systems tonight. Almost like someone's been monitoring our communication. Security breach, no. That's just it. The monitoring seems to be coming from within the manor itself, like there are listening devices built into the architecture that I never detected before." Alfred's expression grew grim. "Sir, if the Court of Owls has been using Wayne Manor as some form of observatory, then they've been watching the Wayne family for generations." The implications settled over them like a shroud. Bruce had always assumed his family's wealth and influence in Gotham was the result of legitimate business acumen and philanthropic dedication. The possibility that the Wayne legacy might be entangled with something darker, something that used their good name as cover for more sinister purposes, challenged everything he thought he knew about his heritage. We access those passages tonight, he decided, but carefully. If the court has been operating from beneath our feet for over a century, they'll have defenses we need to understand. As they prepared to investigate the hidden chambers, the whispers in the walls seemed to take on a different quality. Less urgent, more expectant, as if whatever force generated them was satisfied that their secrets would finally be revealed. Bruce found himself wondering if they were about to uncover the truth about his family's past, or walk directly into a trap that had been waiting for him since birth. The entrance to the hidden passages lay behind what appeared to be a solid stone wall in the manor's wine cellar. Alfred's examination of the historical documents had revealed the proper sequence for accessing it, a series of pressure points that had to be activated in precise order. The mechanism responded to their touch with silent efficiency, revealing that despite its age, it had been maintained in perfect working condition. Someone's been keeping these systems operational, Bruce observed, noting the well-oiled hinges and clean mechanisms. This isn't abandoned architecture, it's active infrastructure. The passage beyond stretched into darkness that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. The walls were lined with the same grey stone used in Gotham's oldest buildings, but the craftsmanship was different, more elaborate, incorporating owl motifs that became increasingly obvious as they progressed deeper underground. Alfred moved beside him with determined composure, though Bruce could sense his discomfort with each step they took further from the familiar manor above. "Sir," the butler said quietly, "there's something else I should mention. Last week, while you were on patrol, I found fresh flowers in the manor's front hall, arranged in patterns I didn't recognize, but placed with obvious intention." "Ha! You didn't mention this before." "I assumed they were a delivery error, but now," Alfred gestured to the owl carvings surrounding them. The arrangement resembled these symbols, almost like someone was leaving us a message. They reached a junction where the passage branched in 3 directions. Each tunnel was marked with different owl variations, some with wings spread, others with eyes that seemed to track their movement in the shifting light. Bruce consulted the historical blueprints, but the documents became increasingly vague about the deeper structures. "The left passage leads toward Gotham proper," he decided. "If we're going to find answers about the court's connection to my family, that's where they'll be." The tunnel they chose descended steadily, its walls gradually incorporating elements that definitely predated the manor's construction. Ancient stones bore inscriptions in languages Bruce couldn't immediately identify, and niches held objects that looked like they'd been placed centuries ago but showed no signs of decay. "Preservation technology that shouldn't exist," Bruce murmured, examining what appeared to be fresh parchment in a niche that should have been sealed for decades. "Someone's been maintaining these artifacts. Or replacing them," Alfred suggested grimly. They emerged into a circular chamber that took their breath away. The space was far larger than the blueprints had suggested, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadows above their heads. The walls were lined with alcoves containing what looked like historical documents, artifacts, and portraits, a secret archive that had been accumulating material for generations. At the center of the chamber stood a large table carved from a single piece of dark stone. Its surface was covered with documents that appeared to be genealogical charts, maps of Gotham's development over time, and what looked like contracts written in archaic legal language. Bruce approached the table carefully, his enhanced vision scanning for security measures, but the chamber seemed to welcome their presence, as if they were expected visitors rather than intruders. "Alfred," he said softly, "look at this." The genealogical chart traced the Wayne family lineage, but with additional notations that didn't appear in any official records. Names were connected not just by blood relationships, but by symbols that resembled the owl motifs throughout the chamber. More disturbing, each generation included notations about services rendered and obligations inherited. According to this, Bruce continued, studying the document with growing unease, every Wayne patriarch has had some form of relationship with the Court of Owls, not as members, but as... He paused, trying to interpret the archaic terminology. As assets, resources to be used when needed. Alfred examined a portrait that bore an uncanny resemblance to Bruce's father. "Sir, this painting shows your father wearing the same owl pin visible in your great-great-grandfather's portrait upstairs. But I never saw him wear such an item, because he wasn't supposed to," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. They turn to find an elderly woman standing in the archway, her appearance so sudden and silent that Bruce's hand moved instinctively toward his utility belt. She was small, bent with age, but her eyes held a sharpness that suggested formidable intelligence. Most notably, she moved with the confidence of someone completely comfortable in these underground spaces. Dr. Helen Cray, she introduced herself, approaching without any apparent fear of Batman's intimidating presence. Former head librarian at Gotham University, current keeper of the court's historical records. I've been waiting for you to find this place, Mr. Wayne. You're not afraid, Bruce observed. At my age, young man, very little frightens me. And I've been hoping someone would finally ask the right questions about Gotham's true history. She gestured to the document spread across the stone table. Your family's story is more complicated than you realize, but perhaps not as dark as you fear. Alfred stepped forward protectively. Madam, if you represent the Court of Owls, I represent the truth. Dr. Cray interrupted gently, which is often more nuanced than either heroes or villains prefer to acknowledge. She moved to one of the wall alcoves, retrieving a leather-bound volume. The Court of Owls has existed in Gotham for centuries, yes, but their relationship with the Wayne family isn't what you might assume. She opened the book, revealing pages of meticulous historical documentation. The first Wayne to settle in Gotham, your ancestor, Nathaniel, wasn't recruited by the court. He was fleeing from them. His family had opposed their influence in other cities, and Gotham was meant to be a place where they could build something different. Bruce studied the documents she indicated, his enhanced vision capturing details that revealed their authenticity. The papers described conflicts between early Wayne family members and court representatives, struggles over Gotham's development that had been carefully erased from official histories. But the court adapted, Dr. Cray continued. Instead of destroying the Wayne family, they decided to use them. Each generation of Waynes would unknowingly serve court interests while believing they were acting independently. Your family's philanthropy, your business decisions, even your location choices, all subtly influenced to serve their agenda, including the manor's location, Alfred realized with dawning horror. Built directly above one of their oldest operational centers, Dr. Cray confirmed. The court has been listening to Wayne family conversations, monitoring your activities, guiding your choices for over a century. Not as enemies, but as shepherds managing valuable resources. The implications struck Bruce like a physical blow. Every major decision his family had made, every philanthropic initiative, every business venture, had they all been manipulated to serve the court's mysterious purposes? But you're here, he said to Dr. Cray, telling me this. Why? Her expression grew sad. Because the current court leadership has decided the Wayne family has outlived its usefulness. Your activities as Batman have made you too independent, too difficult to control. They've decided to retire. Your family's service. A new sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps approaching from multiple directions. Not the whispers they'd been hearing, but the measured tread of people moving with military precision. Talos, Dr. Cray whispered, her composure finally showing cracks. The court's assassins. I'd hoped we'd have more time. Bruce immediately moved to defensive positions, pulling Alfred behind cover while assessing their tactical situation. The chamber had multiple entrances, but they were all now occupied by figures in dark clothing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. How many? He asked Oracle through his cowl's communication system. I can't get clear readings, her voice replied, with obvious frustration. They're using some kind of technology that interferes with standard detection methods. The Talons began advancing into the chamber, moving with inhuman coordination. Their faces were hidden behind masks that resembled stylized owl features, and their movements suggested enhancement beyond normal human capabilities. "Dr. Cray," Bruce said quietly, "is there another way out of here?" "There are passages," she replied, "but they'll know about those too. The court has had centuries to map every inch of these underground systems." One of the Talons stepped forward, removing its mask to reveal features that should have been reassuring in their humanity, but instead were deeply unsettling. The face was young, unmarked by age, but the eyes held knowledge that spoke of decades or centuries of experience. "Bruce Wayne," the Talon spoke, its voice carrying an odd resonance. "Son of Thomas, grandson of Alan, great-grandson of Solomon. The court extends greetings to the latest generation of our unwitting servants." "I serve no one," Bruce replied, moving to keep the Talon in sight while protecting Alfred and Dr. Cray. "Your family has served us for 5 generations, the Talon continued, with what might have been amusement. "Every philanthropic gesture, every business decision, every choice about where to live and how to spend your wealth, all guided by our careful influence. The Wayne legacy exists because we allowed it to exist." Dr. Cray stepped forward with surprising courage. "Tell him about his parents, Nathan. Tell him what the court decided about Thomas and Martha Wayne." The Talon's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been regret. "Your parents began asking inconvenient questions, Bruce Wayne. Like you, they discovered evidence of the court's influence. Unlike you, they attempted to confront us directly." The words hit Bruce like ice water. "You killed them." "We arranged for their removal from active interference," the Talon corrected. "A mugging gone wrong was cleaner than other methods. It preserved the Wayne family reputation while ending their threat to our operations." Alfred made a sound of pure outrage, but Bruce felt only a cold clarity settling over him. Everything he'd believed about his parents' death, about random crime in Gotham, about his motivation for becoming Batman, all of it had been constructed around a lie designed to protect the court's interests. "But you survived," the Talon continued. "And worse, you used your parents' death as motivation to become something we couldn't control. Batman was never part of our plans for the Wayne legacy." "So you've decided to end the arrangement," Bruce concluded. "The Wayne family has served its purpose. Gotham's development has reached the stage where we no longer require your contributions. Your death will be appropriately heroic. Batman, killed while investigating corruption in Gotham's government. The city will mourn you as a fallen hero, never knowing you died defending a legacy built on manipulation." Dr. Cray stepped between Bruce and the advancing Talons. "There's something else you should know," she said urgently. "Something I discovered in the deepest archives. The court's control over your family wasn't perfect. Each generation of Waynes found ways to resist, to plant seeds of future rebellion. Your parents weren't the first to discover the truth. They were part of a plan your great-grandfather put in motion decades ago." She pressed a small object into Bruce's hand, an ornate key that felt warm despite the chamber's cold air. "Solomon Wayne left instructions, hidden where the court couldn't find them. He knew this day would come, when the Wayne family would need to break free completely." The Talon called Nathan advanced with inhuman speed, but Bruce was already moving. Years of training and combat experience merged with desperate determination as he engaged multiple assassins simultaneously. The chamber erupted into violence that seemed to echo through the underground spaces with supernatural resonance. Alfred, despite his age, proved that decades of serving the Wayne family had prepared him for more than just domestic duties. He moved with surprising agility, helping Dr. Cray reach one of the chamber's side passages while providing tactical support that kept the Talons from overwhelming Bruce's position. "The key," Dr. Cray called out as they reached the passage entrance. "Use it on the central altar. Your great-grandfather built countermeasures into this place." Bruce fought his way to the stone table, the key Dr. Cray had given him growing warmer in his hand. At the table's center, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it, was a small lock mechanism carved directly into the stone. The key fit perfectly, turning with a sound like grinding thunder. Immediately the chamber began to change. Hidden mechanisms activated throughout the space, revealing that the Wayne family's ancestors had indeed prepared for this confrontation. Passages sealed themselves, cutting off the Talon's retreat routes. Emergency lighting activated, dispelling the darkness that had been the assassin's primary advantage. Most importantly, a new voice began speaking through hidden acoustic systems built into the chamber's architecture. Solomon Wayne's voice, recorded using technology that shouldn't have existed in the 1920s, but somehow preserved perfectly through the decades. "If you're hearing this message," the voice said, "then the court has finally decided the Wayne family has outlived its usefulness. I've spent my entire adult life preparing for this moment, building defenses they never suspected, creating weapons they couldn't anticipate." The Talons paused in their attack, clearly confused by developments they hadn't expected. "Bruce," the recorded voice continued, somehow addressing him directly, "everything our family built in Gotham was designed to eventually break free from the court's influence. The philanthropic organizations, the business relationships, the political connections, all of it can be turned against them, if you know how to activate the proper systems." New mechanisms activated throughout the chamber, revealing weapons and tools that had been waiting in concealment for decades. But more than physical resources, Solomon Wayne's message provided something more valuable: information about the court's true weaknesses, their operational methods, their hidden vulnerabilities. "The court believes they control Gotham through secret influence and ancient tradition," the message explained, "but they've made a fundamental error. They've become dependent on the very systems they created to control others. Turn those systems against them, and their power collapses like a house of cards." The Talon called Nathan backed away from Bruce, his inhuman composure finally showing cracks. "This is impossible. We monitored every Wayne family member for generations. There were no hidden preparations." "You monitored the family members you knew about," Dr. Cray said from the passage entrance. "But Solomon Wayne had children you never discovered. Bloodlines that continued in secret, preparing for this confrontation while you watched the obvious descendants." Bruce understood. "Alfred." The butler straightened, his expression shifting from that of a loyal servant to something far more complex. "The Pennyworth family didn't begin serving the Waynes in 1855, sir. We are Waynes, a cadet branch that took a different name to avoid the court's attention, but maintained the true family mission across generations." 6 generations of servants, Bruce realized, who were actually 6 generations of guardians, watching, learning, preparing for the day when the court would reveal its true intentions. Alfred nodded. "My family has been documenting the court's activities, mapping their operations, identifying their weaknesses for over a century. Everything they've done to control Gotham we've been preparing to undo." The revelation transformed the tactical situation completely. The court had believed they were confronting an isolated individual, Batman, alone and outnumbered. Instead, they faced the culmination of a multi-generational plan that had been developing parallel to their own schemes. "Oracle," Bruce said, activating his communication systems with new understanding. Initiate the Wayne Foundation's emergency protocols. All of them. Which emergency protocols? Barbara's voice replied with confusion. The ones that were programmed by my great-grandfather and maintained by 6 generations of Pennyworths. Alfred will provide the activation codes. Alfred began speaking rapidly in what sounded like a mixture of languages, providing access codes that activated systems throughout Gotham. The Wayne family's philanthropic network, business holdings, and political connections all began executing pre-programmed responses that had been waiting dormant for decades. Throughout the city, Court of Owls safe houses found their utilities cut off by public works departments responding to emergency infrastructure concerns. Financial institutions began freezing accounts linked to court activities based on fraud investigations that materialized from decades-old evidence files. Political figures who had been serving court interests suddenly found themselves facing corruption charges, supported by documentation that seemed to appear from nowhere. The Talon called Nathan watched these developments with growing alarm. You're destroying centuries of careful work. We're freeing Gotham from centuries of manipulation, Bruce corrected, and the city was never meant to serve the court's agenda. My family's real legacy, the one you never suspected, was preparation for this moment. Dr. Cray emerged from the passage carrying additional documents. The archives contain evidence of the court's crimes going back 2 centuries. With the right distribution, their influence over Gotham's institutions will collapse within days. But Nathan had recovered from his initial shock, and his expression had shifted to something far more dangerous. If we cannot control Gotham through subtlety, we will control it through terror. The court has other resources, other methods. He produced a small device from his clothing, activating it with a gesture that sent signals throughout the underground complex. Immediately, the whispers in the walls returned, but now they carried a different message. Coordinates, target locations, instructions for a coordinated attack on Gotham's infrastructure. Every Talon in the city, Nathan explained with grim satisfaction, every safe house, every hidden operative, every sleeper agent we've positioned over the decades. If Gotham will not serve the court willingly, it will serve us through fear. Bruce understood that they had won a tactical victory but potentially triggered a much larger conflict. The court's response to exposure would be to abandon subtlety entirely, revealing their true strength in a direct assault on the city. Alfred, he said quietly, how extensive are the countermeasures my great-grandfather prepared? The butler's expression was grave but determined. Extensive enough, sir, but implementing them will require revealing the truth about the Wayne family's history to the entire city. There will be no more secrets, no more hidden agendas. Everything becomes public. Bruce looked around the chamber that had held his family's secrets for so long. The choice was clear. Maintain the comfortable lies that had protected the Wayne legacy, or expose everything in order to save Gotham from the court's final gambit. Do it, he decided. All of it. Let Gotham know the truth. Alfred nodded, producing a communication device that connected him to Oracle's systems. Barbara, I'm uploading historical files that will need immediate distribution to every news outlet in the city. Prepare for significant public reaction. What kind of files? She asked, though her tone suggested she was already beginning to process the data. The complete history of the Court of Owls' control over Gotham, Alfred replied, including their manipulation of the Wayne family, their assassination of Bruce's parents, and their current plan to terrorize the city into submission. As Alfred coordinated the information release, Bruce turned his attention to the immediate tactical situation. Nathan and his fellow Talons were preparing to withdraw from the chamber, but their body language suggested they were planning something more than simple retreat. "Dr. Cray," he said, "these underground passages, do they connect to other significant locations in the city?" Her expression grew alarmed. The court built their network to provide access to every major building in Gotham. Government centers, utilities infrastructure, transportation hubs, they can reach anywhere, undetected. And now they're activating all their assets simultaneously, Bruce realized. A coordinated attack designed to cripple the city's ability to respond. Nathan confirmed his analysis with a cold smile. Gotham will learn what happens to cities that refuse the court's guidance. By dawn, your precious city will be begging for our protection. The Talon leader gestured to his companions, and they began moving toward passages that would take them to their assigned targets. But as they moved, something unexpected happened. The passages began sealing themselves, one by one, responding to automated systems that had been triggered by Alfred's data transmission. "Impossible," Nathan snarled, finding his escape route blocked by mechanisms he couldn't override. "My great-grandfather anticipated this scenario as well," Bruce explained. "If the court ever revealed the full extent of their network, the countermeasures would activate to trap them in their own passages." Throughout the underground complex, similar scenes were playing out, as Talons found themselves cut off from their targets by systems that turned the court's own infrastructure against them. The network they had built to control Gotham became a prison that contained their operatives, but Nathan was far from defeated. "You may have trapped us temporarily," he said, "but the court has resources beyond these tunnels. Above ground, our remaining agents are already beginning their work." As if to confirm his words, distant sounds began echoing through the chamber. Explosions, sirens, the sounds of a city under coordinated attack. The court's surface agents were implementing their contingency plan, targeting Gotham's vital systems while their underground operatives were contained. Bruce activated his Cowl's communication systems, connecting with Oracle and the GCPD's emergency services. "Barbara, what's the situation topside?" "Coordinated attacks on power stations, water treatment facilities, communication hubs," she replied, her voice tense with concentration. "It's like they have access to the city's infrastructure blueprints. They're hitting exactly the points that would cause maximum disruption, because they do have those blueprints," Dr. Cray said grimly. "The court has been planning this contingency for decades. If they couldn't control Gotham through manipulation, they would control it through chaos." Alfred looked up from his coordination efforts. "Sir, the information release is having effect. News outlets are beginning to broadcast the truth about the court, and public reaction is significant. But the attacks are undermining the city's ability to respond effectively." Bruce studied the tactical situation, weighing their options. The court's plan was ingenious in its scope, by attacking both the city's infrastructure and its faith in established institutions simultaneously. They were creating conditions that would eventually force Gotham to accept their open rule as preferable to continued chaos. "There's one more countermeasure," he decided, "but it requires exposing something I've kept secret from everyone, including you, Alfred." He moved to a section of the chamber they hadn't previously explored, revealing a hidden alcove that contained equipment that looked distinctly more modern than the rest of the chamber's contents. Bruce activated the systems with codes that weren't in any of the historical documents. "I've been preparing for this possibility since I became Batman," he explained. "Not just preparing to fight the court, but preparing to coordinate with every resource Gotham has, official and unofficial, legal and questionable. The equipment activated, establishing communication links with networks that shouldn't have existed. contact points with every vigilante who had ever operated in Gotham, coordination systems with criminal organizations that had reason to oppose the court's control, emergency protocols with federal agencies that had been quietly monitoring Gotham's unusual activities. "Sir," Alfred said with a mixture of admiration and concern, "you've built your own shadow network to fight shadows." "You need to become one," Bruce replied. "But unlike the court, my network was built on cooperation rather than control. Every participant chose to be involved, understanding the full truth of what they were supporting." Nathan watched these developments with growing alarm. "You cannot rally the entire city against us. Gotham is too divided, too conflicted. Its people will never unite behind a single cause." "You're right," Bruce agreed. "They won't unite behind a cause, but they will unite against a threat. And thanks to the information Alfred is distributing, they now understand exactly what that threat is." Throughout Gotham, the revelation of the court's existence and their role in the city's history was having exactly the effect Bruce had anticipated. Citizens who had never agreed on anything were finding common ground in their outrage at being manipulated for generations. Criminal organizations were suspending their usual activities to focus on eliminating court operatives from their territories. Law enforcement agencies were coordinating with vigilante groups they had previously opposed. The court had unified Gotham, but not in the way they had intended. "Oracle," Bruce said, "coordinate with GCPD, every court safe house, every hidden operative, every Talon that's still active. I want locations and tactical options." "Already on it," Barbara replied. "And Bruce?" "The city's responding better than you might have expected. People are actually working together. It's unprecedented." Nathan's composure finally cracked completely. "This is not possible. Gotham is a city of shadows, secrets, competing interests. It cannot unite against us." "You're right about Gotham being a city of shadows," Bruce acknowledged. "But you made one crucial error. You assumed that meant it was a city of darkness. Sometimes shadows exist to protect the light." Dr. Cray stepped forward, carrying one final document from the archives. "There's something else, Nathan. Something the court never knew about their own history." She opened the ancient text, revealing pages that described the organization's original foundation. The Court of Owls wasn't created to control Gotham. It was created to protect the city from something else. Something the founders feared was coming. Nathan stared at the document, his inhuman composure replaced by very human confusion. That's not possible. Our traditions, our purpose, have been corrupted over the centuries." Dr. Cray continued. "Each generation of court leadership modified the organization's mission, gradually transforming protectors into controllers. The modern court bears almost no resemblance to what its founders intended." Bruce studied the ancient text, his enhanced vision capturing details that revealed its authenticity. The original Court of Owls had been established as guardians against a specific threat, something called the hunger from below, that had apparently menaced other cities throughout history. "What happened to this original threat?" he asked. Dr. Cray's expression grew troubled. "According to these records, it was never eliminated, only contained through the coordinated efforts of protector organizations in multiple cities. But if the Gotham Court has abandoned its original mission," the implications were staggering. The Court of Owls had spent centuries positioning themselves to control Gotham while neglecting their actual responsibility to protect it from something potentially far more dangerous. Nathan seemed to be experiencing some form of existential crisis as he processed this information. We were supposed to be protecting the city? Our assassination protocols, our control networks, our manipulation of civic institutions. were all tools that could have been used for protection, Alfred observed, but instead were turned toward domination. Bruce activated his communication systems again. Oracle, expand the search parameters. I want information about other cities, other protector organizations, anything that relates to this hunger from below reference. Bruce, Barbara's voice carried new urgency. You need to see this. I'm detecting seismic activity beneath the city. Multiple locations, but concentrated in the oldest sections of Gotham's underground. The whispers in the walls returned. But now they carried a different quality entirely. Not the purposeful communication of the court's systems, but something far more primal and disturbing. Whatever force had been contained beneath Gotham for centuries was responding to the chaos above ground. The attacks on the infrastructure, Dr. Cray realized with growing horror. The court's assault on the city's foundations. They're weakening more than just civic systems. They're compromising the containment measures. Nathan looked up from the ancient documents, his face pale with understanding. We have to stop the attacks immediately. Call back all Talons. Cease all operations against the city's infrastructure. Too late, Bruce said, monitoring the seismic readings through his cowl systems. The damage is already accumulating. Whatever your organization was supposed to be containing, it's beginning to break free. The chamber around them began to vibrate with tremors that seemed to come from deep underground, far deeper than the court's passages, far older than Gotham's recorded history. The whispers in the walls transformed into something that might have been screaming, a sound that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to some primal fear center in the human brain. Alfred, Bruce said, I need you to coordinate with Oracle. Get every available resource focused on structural reinforcement of the city's foundations, emergency protocols for underground containment, and, Dr. Cray, I need everything you know about these original protective measures. Sir, Alfred replied, if this threat is as significant as these records suggest, we may need resources beyond what Gotham can provide. Bruce nodded grimly. Then we expand the network. Every contact I've developed, every alliance I've built, every favor I can call in. If the Court of Owls was supposed to be protecting the entire region, then the entire region has a stake in resolving this situation. Nathan stepped forward, his earlier hostility replaced by desperate cooperation. The court still has resources, knowledge that could be useful, if we work together. Because they tried to kill me and destroy the city, Bruce asked. Because the alternative is worse, Nathan replied simply. Far worse. The tremors continued to intensify, and through the underground passages they could hear sounds that suggested the court's network was beginning to collapse under forces that had nothing to do with their previous conflict. Something was rising, from depths that even the court hadn't suspected, and it was using their own tunnels as pathways to the surface. Bruce looked around the chamber that had revealed so many secrets, understanding that they had only begun to uncover the true mysteries lying beneath Gotham. The Court of Owls, the Wayne family legacy, even his own mission as Batman. All of it might be merely surface manifestations of conflicts that went far deeper than anyone had realized. Then we work together, he decided. Of us. Because whatever's down there has been waiting a very long time to reach the surface, and it's not going to care about our previous differences. As they began coordinating their response to this new threat, the whispers in the walls seemed to take on an almost satisfied quality, as if the revelation of Gotham's deepest secrets had been exactly what some ancient intelligence had been waiting for. The Court of Owls had spent centuries believing they controlled the city's destiny, never realizing they were merely the latest chapter in a story that began long before Gotham's foundation, and would continue long after its current crisis was resolved. But for now, In a chamber deep beneath Wayne Manor, representatives of every force that had shaped Gotham's history were finally working together toward a common goal: protecting the city they all, in their different ways, called home. The whispers fell silent, as if whatever force generated them was finally content to watch and wait, while the surface dwellers struggled to understand the true nature of their inheritance. Above them, Gotham continued to burn and rebuild, as it always had, as it always would. A city of shadows and light, secrets and revelations, where the deepest mysteries were always buried just beneath the foundations of everything its citizens thought they knew about their home. The ancient tremors beneath Wayne Manor had finally stilled, and the whispers in the walls fell silent as dawn broke over Gotham. Bruce Wayne stood in his study, watching the first rays of sunlight paint the city's skyline in shades of gold and amber. The revelations about his family's true history with the Court of Owls had changed everything, yet somehow the manor felt more peaceful than it had in months. Alfred entered quietly, carrying a silver tray with morning tea, a return to their cherished routines after the chaos of recent nights. The butler's face showed the weariness of someone who had spent generations guarding family secrets, but also the relief of finally sharing those burdens. "The structural engineers have finished their preliminary assessment of the underground passages, sir," Alfred reported, setting the tray down with practiced precision. "The containment measures appear to be holding, and the city's foundations are stable." Bruce nodded, accepting the offered cup of Earl Grey, and the court's remaining operatives, either in custody or disappeared entirely. It seems that without their central coordination, most chose to abandon Gotham rather than face exposure. Alfred's expression grew thoughtful. "Though Oracle reports some unusual activity in the old theater district. Nothing related to our recent troubles, but perhaps worth monitoring." Theater district? Bruce's interest sharpened slightly. What kind of activity? "Disturbances at some of the abandoned venues. Sounds that residents describe as peculiar. Not the architectural whispers we've grown accustomed to, but something more." Alfred paused, searching for the right word. "Musical, in a disturbing sort of way." Bruce set down his teacup, already sensing that Gotham's mysteries never truly ended. They merely transformed into new patterns that required different kinds of attention. The city's healing from the court's influence would take time, but other shadows were always ready to fill the spaces left by defeated darkness. "Musical disturbances in abandoned theaters," he mused. "That has a familiar ring to it." Alfred's expression showed knowing concern. "Indeed, sir. Particularly when combined with reports of a mild-mannered man who's been seen talking to himself near those same venues. The conversations appear to be rather one-sided arguments." The morning light continued to strengthen outside the study windows, but Bruce found himself already thinking about the coming night. Gotham's secrets had layers within layers, and solving one mystery often revealed doorways to others. The Court of Owls had been contained, but the city's troubled souls continued to need attention, souls that sometimes found strange ways to cry out for help. "I think," Bruce said quietly, "we should pay attention to those theater district reports. Some mysteries whisper through walls and others." He paused, remembering fragments of intelligence about psychological cases that defied conventional understanding. Others sing lullabies that no one should have to hear alone. The gramophone's needle found its groove with a soft whisper, releasing a melody that hadn't been heard in decades. The lullaby drifted through the empty corridors of the Maroni Theater, its notes distorted by age and neglect, transforming what should have been comforting into something deeply unsettling. Batman stood in the theater's abandoned lobby, listening to the ghostly music echo off peeling wallpaper and water-stained velvet. "Rock-a-bye, baby, in the treetop." The warped voice sang through ancient speakers, each word stretched and hollow. "When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall." The crime scene photographer had finished hours ago, leaving behind only chalk outlines and evidence markers. But the gramophone continued its endless loop, playing the same nursery rhyme that had greeted the first officers on scene. 3 bank executives, found arranged in perfect formation across the theater's front row seats, each clutching a porcelain doll that matched their evening attire down to the smallest detail. "Oracle," Batman sub-vocalized, his voice barely disturbing the theater's eerie quiet. "Any progress on identifying the gramophone's origin?" "Still working on it," came the reply through his cowl, "but I found something interesting in the crime scene photos. Look at how the dolls are positioned. Their hands aren't just holding, they're posed in what looks like sign language." Batman approached the nearest chalk outline, studying the residual traces of the scene. Even after the bodies had been removed, an unsettling presence lingered in the theater, as if the building itself had absorbed something from the bizarre tableau. The gramophone's lullaby reached its end and began again, the needle catching slightly on a scratch that added an extra stutter to the opening notes. The song continued its hypnotic cycle while Batman examined the positioning more carefully. Oracle was right. The doll's tiny fingers had been arranged with deliberate precision, forming shapes that suggested communication beyond mere decoration. This wasn't random madness. Someone had taken considerable time to create this grotesque performance. The positioning suggests our perpetrator has knowledge of American Sign Language, Batman observed, photographing the arrangements with his cowl's enhanced imaging. But the message isn't clear from these photos alone. "That's where it gets interesting," Oracle replied. "I've been cross-referencing recent releases from Arkham. Arnold Wesker was discharged 3 weeks ago, officially cured according to his psychiatric evaluation. No sign of the Scarface personality in his final 6 months of treatment." Batman felt a familiar chill at the mention of Wesker's name. The ventriloquist had always been one of Gotham's most tragic villains, a gentle soul fractured by trauma, controlled by the murderous persona he projected onto his wooden dummy. If Wesker was truly healed, why were they seeing his signature style of theatrical crime? The gramophone's lullaby grew fainter as Batman made his way deeper into the theater. Following a trail of small wooden splinters that led toward the stage, the Maroni had been closed for renovations when the crime occurred, its grand interior stripped down to bare bones. But someone had taken care to set this scene with theatrical precision, using the empty space like a canvas for their disturbing art. Backstage, Batman discovered more evidence of the perpetrator's careful preparation. The makeup tables had been arranged with surgical precision, each station containing identical sets of children's cosmetics. Rosy cheeks, bright red lips, the kind of innocent decoration that became sinister in this context. The wooden splinters were more concentrated here, suggesting that whatever puppet had been involved had spent considerable time in this area. "Alfred," Batman spoke into his comm, "I need you to contact Leslie Tompkins. If Wesker is involved in this, we need to understand his current psychological state." "Already on it, Master Bruce." Alfred's cultured voice provided a welcome contrast to the gramophone's endless lullaby. "Dr. Tompkins has agreed to meet with you tonight. She's quite concerned about Mr. Wesker's discharge. Apparently, she wasn't consulted, despite having treated him extensively in the past." Batman continued his investigation, noting how the crime scene's theatrical elements suggested someone with deep knowledge of both performance and psychology. The bank executives hadn't been killed here. They'd been brought to the theater post-mortem, arranged like actors in some macabre play. But what story? was the killer trying to tell? The gramophone's lullaby finally wound down as Batman reached the theater's basement levels. Here, in storage areas that hadn't seen light in years, he discovered the killer's true workshop. Rows of workbenches lined the walls, each covered with puppet-making supplies. Wood shavings, tiny fabric scraps, paint pots filled with flesh tones and bright primary colors. But these weren't ordinary puppets. Each figure on the benches was crafted to resemble real people, their features painstakingly carved and painted to match photographs pinned above each workspace. Batman recognized several faces from recent missing persons reports, their wooden doubles staring back at him with glassy, unseeing eyes. Oracle, I'm sending you images of approximately 30 puppets, each one apparently modeled after a real person, cross-relating them with missing persons, recent deaths, and anyone who might have had contact with Arnold Wesker. Processing now, Oracle replied, her typing audible through the comm. Bruce, some of these faces, they're children. Kids who've been reported missing over the past month. Batman's blood chilled as he examined the puppets more closely. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each tiny face captured with loving detail, their expressions peaceful and innocent. But the implications were horrifying. If these represented real children, where were the originals? A soft sound from the workshop's far corner drew his attention. Not the gramophone's lullaby, but something else. A whisper, barely audible, like a child talking to themselves in the dark. Batman approached carefully, his enhanced hearing isolating the sound from the building's other ambient noise. Please don't hurt me, the whisper repeated, so faint it might have been imagination. I'll be good, I promise. I'll be so very good. The voice led him to a hidden alcove behind the workshop, where a single figure sat hunched in the shadows. Not a puppet this time, but a man, thin, fragile, wearing clothes that seemed too large for his diminished frame. Arnold Wesker looked up as Batman approached, his eyes wide with the kind of terror that comes from a mind pushed beyond its limits. "You're not supposed to see me," Wesker whispered, his voice the same one Batman had heard pleading in the darkness. "The teacher doesn't like visitors. The teacher gets very angry when people interrupt the lessons." Batman knelt slowly, recognizing the need for careful approach. Wesker's psychological state was clearly fragile, but this wasn't the same man who had been dominated by the Scarface personality. Something new had taken residence in his fractured mind, something that spoke of lessons and teachers rather than gangster violence. "Arnold," Batman said gently, using the tone he'd learned from watching Leslie Tompkins work with trauma victims. "I'm here to help. Tell me about the teacher." Wesker's hands moved constantly as he spoke, his fingers forming shapes that Batman now recognized as sign language, but the movements were jerky, compulsive, as if he was being forced to translate every word into silent gestures. "The teacher comes at night," Wesker whispered, his fingers spelling out words with mechanical precision. "Shows me how to make the children safe, how to keep them from getting hurt like I did. The puppets can't feel pain, you see. They're perfect. They're protected." "Where are the children, Arnold? The real ones?" "Safe," Wesker replied, his sign language becoming more agitated. "All safe. The teacher showed me how to keep them safe forever. No more crying, no more fear, just quiet, peaceful sleep." Batman felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with horrible clarity. The missing children, the elaborate puppet workshop, the theatrical crime scenes. Someone had convinced Wesker that he was protecting children by recreating them as wooden dolls, but the method of that protection remained terrifyingly unclear. "Arnold, I need you to show me where the children are. They need help." Wesker shook his head violently, his hands moving so rapidly that his sign language became illegible. No, no, no. The teacher says no visitors. The teacher says the lessons aren't finished. The children have to learn to be quiet first, have to learn to sleep. The sound of footsteps echoed from the theater above, slow and deliberate. Batman recognized the cadence. Someone was walking through the empty seats, perhaps retracing the killer's steps. But Wesker's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He curled into a tight ball, his whispered pleas becoming more frantic. "He's coming," Wesker breathed. "The teacher is coming for his lesson. I haven't been good enough. I haven't made them quiet enough." Batman activated his comm with a subtle gesture. "Oracle, I need immediate backup at the Maroni Theater, and get me everything you can find on anyone who might have had access to Wesker during his Arkham treatment." The footsteps above grew closer, accompanied by a new sound, the soft tap 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 of something wooden against the theater's wooden floors. Not the heavy thunk of Scarface's wooden body, but something smaller, more delicate. A conductor's baton, perhaps, or a puppet's limbs moved by invisible strings. "Arnold," Batman said urgently, helping Wesker to his feet. "We need to leave, now." But Wesker pulled away, his terror making him surprisingly strong. "No, if I run, he'll hurt the children. The teacher said they have to learn their lessons. They have to learn to be quiet and still and perfect. The children are already hurt, Arnold. They need medical attention. They need to go home to their families." "Families hurt children," Wesker replied, his voice taking on a different cadence, higher, more childlike. "Families make children cry and scream and beg. The teacher showed me the truth. Showed me how families break little minds into pieces." Batman realized he was no longer speaking to Arnold Wesker alone. The fractured man's mind had created a new protector personality, one that spoke with the voice of a terrified child but acted with adult cunning. This wasn't possession or external control, it was Wesker's psyche attempting to heal itself by recreating the dynamic that had once made him feel safe. The footsteps stopped directly above them, and a new voice drifted down through the theater's floorboards. Clear, cultured, with the precise diction of an old-fashioned schoolteacher. "Children, children, where have you wandered? Time for your lesson in being properly ordered." Wesker whimpered at the sound, his entire body trembling. "The teacher found us. He always finds us when we're bad. When we make noise, when we don't follow the rules." Batman drew Wesker deeper into the workshop shadows, his mind racing through possible escape routes. The voice above was human, not supernatural, which meant they were dealing with someone who had gained psychological control over Wesker through calculated manipulation. Someone who understood how to exploit existing trauma to create a new form of puppet show. "Arnold, listen to me," Batman whispered. "The teacher isn't real. He's just another puppet, just like Scarface. You have the power to make him stop." "No," Wesker shook his head frantically. "Scarface was loud and angry and mean. The teacher is kind. The teacher cares about children. The teacher wants to keep them safe from people like the ones who hurt me." The voice above began to sing the same lullaby that had been playing on the gramophone but now performed live with disturbing sweetness. "Rockabye children, don't make a sound. When lessons are over, peace will be found. Hush now, be still, let teacher take care. Soon you'll be perfect, beyond all despair." Wesker began moving toward the workshop's exit, drawn by the voice like a moth to flame. Batman realized that physical restraint would only traumatize him further, but allowing him to return to his captor wasn't an option either. "Arnold, wait. Tell me about the children. Are they hurt? Are they frightened?" "They were..." Wesker paused, his expression becoming distant. so frightened, crying all the time, begging to go home, but the teacher showed me how to make the fear stop, how to make everything stop. They sleep so peacefully now. Batman's blood ran cold. Arnold, are the children still alive? Alive? Wesker looked confused by the question. They're safe. Safe and quiet and perfect, just like the teacher promised. Just like I always wanted to be when I was little and the bad men came at night. Before Batman could respond, the basement door opened and a figure descended the stairs. Tall, thin, wearing the formal black robes of an old-fashioned schoolmaster. His face was pale and angular, with the kind of severe features that belonged in Victorian portraits of stern educators. He carried a conductor's baton in one hand and what appeared to be a leather-bound gradebook in the other. "Mr. Wesker," the figure said with disappointed authority, "you know better than to speak to strangers. We've discussed this in our lessons. Silence is golden. Stillness is perfection. Why must you force me to repeat these basic principles?" Wesker immediately fell silent, his hands clasping behind his back in the posture of a chastised schoolchild. Batman noted the complete transformation. The terrified, broken man had become something else entirely, responding to conditioned behavioral cues with automatic precision. "And you," the teacher turned his attention to Batman, "are disrupting my classroom. This is a place of learning, a sanctuary where damaged children finally discover peace." Batman replied carefully, studying the man's mannerisms for clues to his identity. "They're finding terror and isolation. They need to go home." The teacher's laugh was genuinely amused, the sound of someone who found the comment adorably naive. "Home? Do you know what these children's homes were like? Do you understand the daily horrors they endured before I rescued them?" He opened his gradebook, revealing pages filled with detailed case histories, written in precise copperplate handwriting. Little Sarah Morrison, age 7. Parents divorced. Bitter custody battle. Used as a weapon between two people who claimed to love her. Tommy Chen, age 9. Father worked 16-hour days. Mother medicated herself into oblivion. Child raised by television and neglect. Batman recognized the names from missing persons reports, but the teacher's information went far beyond what would be available in public records. Someone had conducted extensive surveillance on these families, documenting every moment of dysfunction and pain. "You researched them," Batman observed. "Watched them, identified vulnerable targets." "I identified children who needed rescue," the teacher corrected firmly. "Children whose families had already abandoned them emotionally. I simply completed the process, providing them with the peace their biological guardians could never offer." Wesker nodded along with the teacher's words, his expression showing the kind of desperate hope that comes from finding meaning in trauma. This wasn't random madness. It was a carefully constructed delusion that allowed both men to feel righteous about their actions. "Where are they?" Batman asked. "The real children, not the puppets." The teacher smiled with genuine warmth, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost benevolent. "They're sleeping, of course. Perfect, dreamless sleep. No more nightmares about angry parents or empty houses. No more tears or fears or desperate pleas for love that will never come." Batman realized with growing horror that the teacher might not be lying. If his definition of perfect sleep was what it seemed to be, then the missing children were beyond rescue. But he couldn't accept that possibility, not without seeing proof, not without exhausting every alternative. "Show me," Batman said. "If they're truly at peace, show me where they're sleeping." The teacher considered this request with the careful deliberation of an actual educator. "Very well, but you must promise to observe quietly, no disruptions, no attempts to wake them. They've worked so hard to achieve this level of tranquility." He led them through a hidden passage behind the workshop. Wesker following with the obedient shuffle of a well-trained student. Batman catalogued every detail of their route, noting ventilation patterns and structural weaknesses that might be useful for emergency extraction. The passage opened into what had once been the theater's old rehearsal room, now converted into something that resembled a Victorian nursery crossed with a medical facility. Rows of small beds lined the walls, each covered with pristine white sheets and equipped with monitoring equipment that tracked vital signs in precise digital display. In each bed lay a child, perfectly still, breathing so slowly and deeply that they appeared to be in some form of medical coma. Their faces were peaceful, unmarked by the terror Batman had expected, but there was an unnatural quality to their stillness that suggested pharmaceutical intervention rather than natural sleep. "Beautiful, aren't they?" the teacher whispered, moving between the beds like a proud parent checking on his charges. No more restless tossing and turning, no more crying out in the night, pure, untroubled rest. Batman examined the nearest monitoring station, recognizing sophisticated life support equipment mixed with what appeared to be experimental psychiatric hardware. The children weren't dead, but they weren't truly alive either, suspended in some twilight state between consciousness and oblivion. "What did you give them?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "A combination of techniques," the teacher replied proudly. "Pharmacological intervention to suppress the stress responses that cause nightmares and anxiety. Neurological dampening to quiet the overactive brain patterns that make children so restless and demanding. And of course, my own special lessons in perfect behavior." He gestured to speakers mounted throughout the room, from which soft lullabies played in an endless loop. Not the distorted gramophone recordings from the theater, but clear, sweet voices singing gentle songs about sleep and safety and never having to wake up. "The music is calibrated to specific brainwave frequencies," the teacher explained. "Combined with the medication, it maintains the precise level of consciousness needed for perfect rest. They hear my voice in their dreams, teaching them lessons about stillness and silence, and the beauty of never having to face another frightening day." Batman forced himself to check each child's vital signs, confirming that they were stable but heavily sedated. Reversing whatever the teacher had done would require immediate medical intervention and possibly extensive rehabilitation. But they were alive, which meant rescue was still possible. "This isn't peace," Batman said carefully, aware that the wrong words might trigger defensive violence. "Happiness. This is imprisonment. These children deserve the chance to grow up, to overcome their fears, to find real happiness." The teacher's expression hardened, his benevolent facade cracking to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. "Happiness? Do you think happiness was waiting for these children in their broken homes? Do you think Sarah Morrison would have been happy watching her parents destroy each other? Do you think Tommy Chen would have been happy growing up invisible and unwanted?" Batman realized he was looking at someone whose own childhood trauma had been twisted into a justification for perpetual cruelty. The teacher wasn't motivated by sadism, but by a genuinely held belief that he was saving these children from lives of pain and disappointment. "They deserve the chance to make that choice for themselves," Batman replied, "to decide whether life's difficulties are worth facing. You've taken away their agency, their future, their hope." "Hope?" The teacher laughed bitterly. "Hope is what keeps children suffering in situations that will never improve. Hope is the cruelest lie adults tell children, that someday things will get better, that someday someone will love them properly, that someday their pain will have meaning." Wesker had been listening to this exchange with growing agitation, his hands moving in compulsive sign language patterns. Now he stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. "But what if they want to wake up? What if they want to try again? The teacher turned to him with disappointment so profound it was almost parental. Mr. Wesker, we've discussed this. Children don't know what's best for them. That's why they need teachers, need guides who can see the bigger picture. These little ones will thank us someday when they're old enough to understand what we've saved them from. I wanted someone to save me, Wesker said, his voice growing stronger, when I was little and scared and alone. But I didn't want to stop existing. I wanted someone to make the scary things go away so I could keep being alive. Batman saw the crack in the teacher's psychological hold over Wesker and pressed the advantage. These children want the same thing Arnold wanted. Not an end to consciousness, but help facing their fears. A chance to heal instead of hide. The teacher's composure finally shattered, revealing the frightened, angry child beneath his authoritative facade. You don't understand. None of you understand. Some children are too broken to heal. Some pain is too deep to overcome. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let them sleep forever. He grabbed a syringe from a nearby medical cart, its contents clearly intended for maintaining the children's comatose state. But instead of threatening his victims, he held it to his own throat. A final gesture of control from someone whose entire identity was built around having power over others. If I can't protect them properly, then I'll join them in perfect sleep. At least we'll be together in peace, away from a world that only knows how to hurt innocent souls. Batman and Wesker both moved simultaneously, but it was Wesker who reached the teacher first. Not with violence, but with the kind of gentle touch one traumatized person offers another. Don't, Wesker said softly. I know it hurts. I know you think this is the only way, but these children, they're not us. They don't have to carry what we carry. They can be different. They can be better. The teacher stared at him with confusion, as if seeing clearly for the first time in years. But the pain, how do they live with so much pain? The same way we do, Wesker replied. One day at a time, one breath at a time, and maybe with help from people who understand. Batman watched as two broken men found a moment of genuine connection. Their shared trauma creating a bridge between victim and victimizer. The teacher's hand trembled as he lowered the syringe, his entire worldview crumbling as he began to see his actions through Wesker's eyes. I thought I was protecting them, the teacher whispered. I thought I was giving them what I always wanted, a place where no one could hurt them anymore. You were protecting yourself, Batman said gently, trying to create a world where childhood trauma couldn't exist. But healing doesn't come from stopping pain, it comes from learning to live with it, to grow beyond it. The sound of sirens filled the air as GCPD units and emergency medical teams arrived at the theater. Batman had been maintaining contact with Oracle throughout the encounter, ensuring that proper medical support would be available for the children's recovery. Will they be all right? Wesker asked, watching as paramedics began the delicate process of reversing the children's pharmaceutical suspension. Will they remember what happened here? Some of it, Batman admitted. But Dr. Tompkins will work with them, help them process the experience in healthy ways. They'll have the chance to heal properly, not by forgetting their trauma, but by learning to live with it. The teacher allowed himself to be taken into custody without resistance, his authoritative facade completely gone. As the police led him away, he looked back at the sleeping children with genuine anguish. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I was saving you. Wesker watched until the teacher disappeared, then turned to Batman with an expression of profound sadness. He wasn't evil, was he? Just scared and broken and trying to make sense of senseless things. Like all of us, Batman agreed. The difference is in how we choose to handle that brokenness, whether we use it to justify hurting others, or whether we find ways to help. As the children were carefully transported to Gotham General for medical evaluation and treatment, Batman reflected on the thin line between victim and victimizer. Both Wesker and the teacher had experienced childhood trauma that shattered their ability to trust the world. One had created Scarface to embody his rage. The other had created a teaching persona to embody his desire for control. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice came through the comm as Batman prepared to leave the theater. "Dr. Tompkins has arrived at the hospital. She's optimistic about the children's recovery, though she warns it will take time and careful psychological support. And Wesker, also in Dr. Tompkins' care, she believes his experience tonight, standing up to the teacher, choosing to protect the children rather than enable their captor, represents a significant breakthrough in his own healing process." Batman made his way back through the theater's empty corridors, past the abandoned gramophone that had finally wound down to silence. The building felt different now, not haunted by trauma, but somehow lighter, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. Outside, Gotham's night continued its eternal cycle of shadows and streetlights, crime and compassion, fear and hope. The city's broken souls would keep struggling with their demons, some finding healing and others succumbing to their damage. But tonight, 15 children had been given the chance to wake up from nightmares not of their own making, to face their fears with proper support rather than artificial peace. Batman swung into the night, carrying with him the memory of Arnold Wesker's quiet courage, a reminder that even the most fractured minds could choose compassion over cruelty, protection over possession. In Gotham's endless darkness, such moments of genuine human connection were more precious than any treasure, more powerful than any weapon. The lullabies had ended, but the real work of healing was just beginning. For the rescued children, for Arnold Wesker, and for all the broken souls who called Gotham home, recovery would be a long journey measured not in grand gestures, but in small, daily choices to keep trying, keep hoping, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. In the distance, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, bringing the promise of another day in a city that never quite gave up on its lost children, no matter how far they had wandered into the dark. 3 days later, Batman found himself standing in the pediatric wing of Gotham General Hospital, watching through reinforced glass as Dr. Leslie Tompkins worked with the rescued children. The recovery process was delicate, each child responding differently to the gradual withdrawal from the teacher's pharmaceutical cocktail. Some woke confused but alert, others drifted in and out of consciousness like swimmers learning to surface from great depths. The neurological dampening effects are wearing off faster than expected, Dr. Tompkins explained, joining Batman at the observation window. Children's brains are remarkably resilient. Their natural healing processes are already working to restore normal sleep patterns and emotional responses. Batman watched a young girl, Sarah Morrison according to her chart, as she sat up in bed, looking around with the wide-eyed wonder of someone seeing the world clearly for the first time in weeks. A nurse was patiently explaining where she was, offering reassurance that she was safe, that her parents were coming to see her soon. "What about their memories of the experience?" Batman asked. "Fragmented, mostly. The medications created a dreamlike state where reality and fantasy blended together. Some remember the lullabies, others recall peaceful feelings, but can't identify the source. It's actually protective. Their minds are filtering out the most traumatic elements while retaining enough to process the experience safely." Dr. Tompkins led him down the hallway to a private room where Arnold Wesker sat by a window, his hands occupied with delicate woodworking, not puppet making this time, but simple carving, small birds and flowers that seemed to emerge naturally from blocks of pine and oak. He's been working constantly since he arrived, Dr. Tompkins noted quietly. But look at what he's creating now, living things, growing things. His subconscious is choosing symbols of life and renewal rather than control and possession. Wesker looked up as they entered, his expression calmer than Batman had ever seen it. The frantic energy that had characterized both his Scarface period and his recent trauma was gone, replaced by something approaching genuine peace. "The children," Wesker said without preamble, "are they healing?" "They are," Dr. Tompkins assured him. "Thanks in large part to your courage. When you chose to protect them instead of enabling their captor, you broke the cycle that had trapped you both." Wesker nodded slowly, his hands continuing their careful carving. "I keep thinking about what you said, Batman. About healing coming from learning to live with pain rather than avoiding it. The teacher, Marcus, he tried to create a world without suffering, but that's not really living, is it?" Batman pulled up a chair, noting how Wesker had used the teacher's real name. Oracle's investigation had revealed Dr. Marcus Crane, a former child psychologist who had lost his license after experimental treatments on young patients. His own childhood had been marked by severe institutional abuse, creating the same cycle of trauma that had shaped Wesker's life. "How do you feel about testifying at his trial?" Batman asked. "Scared," Wesker admitted honestly, "but also hopeful, I think. Maybe if I can help people understand why he did what he did without excusing it, maybe other broken people won't have to go through the same journey." Dr. Tompkins smiled at this response. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that leads to genuine healing. Using your experience to help others rather than to justify harmful actions." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Wesker's hands shape the wood into something beautiful and alive. Outside the hospital window, Gotham continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, but in this small room, something profound had shifted. The cycle of trauma and revenge had been broken, replaced by the slower but more sustainable process of genuine recovery. "There's something else," Wesker said eventually. "Something I need to tell you about the crime scenes." The bank executives at the theater. Batman listened as Wesker explained how Marcus had orchestrated those deaths as a way of funding his operation. The executives hadn't been random victims but carefully chosen targets, men who had profited from foreclosing on the homes of troubled families, creating more displaced and vulnerable children. "Convinced me they deserved it," Wesker continued, "that we were protecting future children by eliminating people who preyed on struggling families. But that was just another way of avoiding the real work, helping existing children heal instead of preventing future suffering through violence." The sign language, Batman realized. The doll's hands were spelling out accusations against each victim. A confession, actually. Marcus wanted to document his righteousness, to leave evidence that would justify our actions to anyone who understood the code. He thought history would vindicate him as a protector of innocence. Dr. Tompkins made notes in Wesker's file, documenting this breakthrough in his understanding of his own actions. "This level of insight is remarkable, Arnold. You're not just remembering what happened, you're analyzing the psychological mechanisms that made it possible." "I had good teachers," Wesker replied with a slight smile. "People who showed me that understanding doesn't require approval, that I can recognize someone's pain without excusing their actions." Batman reflected on how different this conversation was from his usual encounters with Gotham's villains. Most remained trapped in cycles of justification and blame, unable to see beyond their own suffering. Wesker's willingness to examine his actions honestly, to feel empathy for both victims and victimizers, represented a rare form of moral courage. "The children will need ongoing support," Dr. Tompkins noted. "Their families are well-meaning but often lack the resources to address underlying issues that made the children vulnerable in the first place. We're arranging comprehensive family therapy, but it's a long-term process. What about funding?" Batman asked, already knowing the answer. "Limited, as always. Insurance covers basic medical care, but not the intensive psychological support these families need. Some will fall through the cracks, returning to the same dysfunctional patterns that attracted Marcus's attention initially." Batman made a mental note to discuss this with the Wayne Foundation's charitable giving committee. Money alone couldn't heal trauma, but it could provide the stability and professional support that made healing possible. "I've been thinking about that too," Wesker said quietly. "About what I could do to help. I can't undo what happened, but maybe I could work with other broken people, show them that there are alternatives to the puppet shows we create to avoid facing reality." Dr. Tompkins looked surprised but pleased. "That's actually an excellent idea. Peer counseling can be incredibly effective, especially when it comes from someone who truly understands the experience of dissociation and psychological fragmentation." "It would mean staying in Gotham," Wesker continued, "facing all the places where I hurt people. But running away didn't work. Maybe it's time to try staying and making amends." Batman watched as Wesker carved delicate feathers into one of his wooden birds, each detail rendered with patient precision. The same hands that had once wielded Scarface's Tommy gun were now creating something beautiful, something that spoke of flight rather than captivity. A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A young nurse entered, pushing a wheelchair containing one of the rescued children, Tommy Chen, the 9-year-old whose parents' neglect had made him vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation. "Mr. Wesker," the boy said tentatively. "Dr. Tompkins said you were the one who saved us, that you stood up to the teacher when he wanted to keep us asleep forever." Wesker set down his carving tools, giving Tommy his full attention. "I had help," he said gently, "and I almost made the wrong choice. I was scared too, just like you. But you chose to help us anyway," Tommy persisted, "even though you were scared. That's what heroes do, right?" Batman watched this exchange with profound interest. Tommy's parents were in the hallway, looking ashamed and uncertain. They had been working multiple jobs to support their family, leaving Tommy alone for hours each day. The child's kidnapping had forced them to confront the emotional neglect that had made him susceptible to Marcus's false promises of care and attention. "I'm not a hero," Wesker replied honestly. "I'm just someone who learned that being scared doesn't have to mean making bad choices. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting when you need help." Tommy nodded gravely, processing this with the serious consideration children give to important truths. "My parents are going to therapy now, all of us together. Dr. Tompkins says it will help us understand each other better." "That's wonderful," Wesker said, and Batman could hear genuine happiness in his voice. "Learning to understand each other, that's the most important lesson anyone can teach." After Tommy and his parents left, Wesker returned to his carving with renewed focus. But now he was working on something different. A family of wooden figures, parents and children joined together in a circle, their faces turned toward each other with expressions of attention and care. The opposite of what Marcus created. Dr. Tompkins observed. Instead of isolated perfection, you're carving connection and engagement. The teacher showed those children a world without pain, Wesker said thoughtfully. But pain is how we know we're alive, how we know something matters enough to hurt when we lose it. The trick is learning to feel the pain without being destroyed by it. Batman considered this wisdom, thinking of his own journey through grief and loss. The death of his parents had created a wound that would never fully heal, but he had learned to channel that pain into purpose rather than destruction. The difference between him and Gotham's villains often came down to that choice, whether to use suffering as fuel for growth or as justification for harm. I should go, Batman said, standing to leave. But Arnold, thank you. What you did at the theater, choosing to protect those children instead of enabling their captor, that took real courage. Wesker looked up from his carving, meeting Batman's eyes directly for perhaps the first time in all their encounters. Thank you for seeing me as more than just another villain, for believing that broken people can choose to heal instead of break others. As Batman prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Tompkins walked with him toward the exit. He's going to be all right, you know, she said quietly. Not cured, that's not how trauma recovery works, but he's developing genuine coping mechanisms, real insights into his own behavior. That's the foundation for a meaningful life. And the children, most will recover fully, given time and proper support. A few may struggle with trust issues or anxiety, but they're young enough that their brains can rewire around the trauma. The key is ensuring they have stable, loving environments to return to, which means working with their families as much as with the children themselves. Batman nodded, thinking of his own childhood trauma and the different path his recovery had taken. Alfred's steady presence, the resources of Wayne Manor, the ability to channel his pain into a mission of protection. Not everyone had such advantages. The children Marcus had targeted came from families struggling with poverty, a mental illness, and other challenges that made recovery more difficult. The Wayne Foundation will want to help, he said. Whatever resources these families need for long-term treatment and support. Dr. Tompkins smiled. I was hoping you'd say that remember, money is just the beginning. What these children really need is the same thing Arnold needed. People who see their potential for healing rather than just their capacity for damage. As Batman left the hospital, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. A case that began with grotesque puppet shows and distorted lullabies had evolved into something much more complex. A meditation on the nature of protection, the relationship between victim and victimizer, and the delicate process by which broken minds learn to heal. The streets of Gotham stretched out before him, filled with the usual mixture of crime and compassion, despair and hope. Somewhere in the city's shadows, other damaged souls were struggling with their own puppet shows, the psychological defenses and distorted narratives that trauma creates to protect fragile minds from unbearable reality. But tonight had shown him something important. Even the most fractured psyche could choose healing over harm, connection over control, authentic growth over artificial peace. Arnold Wesker's transformation from victim to victimizer to survivor offered hope for every broken soul Batman encountered in his nightly patrol. The gramophone had fallen silent, its distorted lullabies replaced by the genuine sounds of healing. Children's laughter in hospital corridors, the quiet conversations of families learning to communicate honestly, the steady breathing of those who could finally sleep peacefully without pharmaceutical intervention. In Gotham's eternal struggle between light and darkness, such moments of authentic human connection were rare and precious. They reminded Batman why he continued his mission, why he chose to see potential for redemption even in the city's most damaged residents. The puppet shows would continue. New traumas would create new defenses, new ways of avoiding painful reality. But so would the possibility of genuine healing, genuine choice, genuine hope. As dawn broke over the city, Batman disappeared into the shadows that had always been his home, carrying with him the memory of Arnold Wesker's quiet courage and the rescued children's tentative smiles. In a world full of artificial puppets and distorted lullabies, such authentic moments of human resilience were the most beautiful music of all. And so our tale of Gotham comes to an end. Let the gentle night embrace you as you drift toward peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Knight watches over his city. If you're not asleep yet, we will now play the ambience of Gotham City at night to help you fall asleep. And if you were just listening to our tales, we will see you next time. Good night and sleep well.